Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of TruthWanted. I am your host, ObjectivelyDan, and this is the live call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. If you want to call us, you definitely can. The number is down below. It's 512-991-9242, or you can do it through your computer at tiny.cc/calltw. So definitely think about that. TruthWanted is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of positive atheist culture and the separation of religion and government. And of course, every single week we have a special guest. This week is no different. Not really a guest, other co-host of this show is ExXtian Erin. ExXtian Erin, welcome to the show that you host.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. I this is normally the part where I introduce you, but everybody should know who you are if you watch this show pretty regularly. But we did have another guest that was scheduled this week. They had to reschedule, but it's okay because now we have the Dan's Deep Dives right now. I was like, hey, Erin, do you want me to do a Dan's Deep Dive or do you want to do something? And Erin was like, you know what? I want to do something. And so I was like, well, we can't call it a Dan's Deep Dive because you're not Dan.
My name's not Dan. Yeah, it doesn't work.
Dan. So instead, what are we calling this thing, Erin? You have a brilliant name for this.
It's brilliant is a little generous, but I would like to call this next segment Erin's Extended Entry.
Erin's Extended Entry. She came up with this in like 2 seconds, and I was like, that's brilliant. So keeping up with the alliteration, today we're doing an Erin's Extended Entry. I'm super excited about this, because I contacted you literally on Tuesday about this, and you already have like several pages of notes that you have already showed me. It's on.
I have it. You asked me, and I knew exactly what I wanted to talk about.
So what are we going to talk about tonight, Erin?
Okay, so I posted about this on my Twitter last week or so. It's a case that happened in Canada recently, and it's something that I have a lot of familiarity with because of the way that I was raised. So today we're going to talk about exorcism, and there's other variations of it. So just to back up to like what triggered this whole thought process for me was that there was a case in Canada where a young boy, I think he was 13 or 14, was subjected to an exorcism at the Bible camp that he was at. Leading up to the event, there was a lot of obviously kind of explaining about the demonic world, and I think there had been a lot of lectures of what to look out for, and basically there was a lot of what I would call now priming these young individuals for this. And then later on in the week, there was I'm not sure what the incident was, but this young boy that at this summer camp was told, you have a demon, and thus began this process of an exorcism on this young child. Really, the event was really traumatizing for this individual as well as everybody else involved in it. The boys that were at the camp called their parents and were picked up, and then quickly after they got home, their parents realized that something really traumatic had happened to these boys. And so the parents of said children involved in this event are seeking, possible criminal charges, because this is being viewed at by a lot of people as some sort of an assault. So I saw the article. It was already fascinating to me because this happened at a Bible camp that is literally an hour away from the Bible camp that I went to growing up as a Canadian. So I was already fascinated with it. I did my own deep dive as this event was happening, and I was looking at the article, and I was noticing a lot of the language in the article. So they used the words exorcism and these poor kids afterwards, they were experiencing all sorts of trauma, and they had been diagnosed with things like paranoid delusion and anxiety, depression, and a lot of them were in treatment already for this. So I would like to go over a deep dive, or Erin's extended entry.
Erin's extended entry, right?
Over exorcisms.
Yeah,
let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. And then, we mentioned, of course, the news story was was the inspiring factor, I guess, which is a terrible word to say, but it was the instigating factor.
Unfortunately.
But if you are interested in up-to-date coverage of news of religion and other related things, I do suggest you listen to the flagship show of the Atheist Community of Austin, nonprofits.
Yes.
I was just told before the show up by nonprofits members saying, "Hey, are you guys encroaching on the nonprofits territory by talking about current events?" And I was like, you know what? I'll give a shout out to the nonprofits. So definitely check that out.
It's an inspiring concept, right? Like,
Yeah.
something happens in the real world, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about the real life implications of what's happening. So yeah, definitely check out nonprofits, because they would take something like this and really go into their own deep dive from 3 to 4 different people's perspective as well.
Now, Erin, I know a little bit about exorcisms. I mean, like, I've seen, obviously, The Exorcist, the movie and stuff, right? I grew up around people who definitely believe they were real. It was never part of my faith tradition in particular. But in preparation, I was also reading some notes on this so that I can give commentary. So you tell me where do you want to start with this?
First thing I would like to ask you, Dan, is when I say exorcism, what are the first things that come to your mind?
Yeah,
images,
I mean,
and that sort.
Like, there's the movie, right? I think a lot of people talk about that. It's like a general horror trope. And besides that, though, it's like sketchy YouTube videos of people in foreign countries doing exorcisms on a populace there or something. And obviously, it's not even just foreign countries. It happens all the time in the United States. But like, that's when you see a lot of the more, I would say, sketchier miracle stuff too, as well, right? Like the pretending people can grow their legs back, even on both sides. Other kinds of miracle healings and stuff, that sort of thing. Like, it tends to get lumped into that, but sometimes it's like its own performance. It's like its own, subject matter, right?
Right. I feel that a lot of people, when they hear the word exorcism, they immediately get a Catholic kind of image.
There is that too. Yeah.
So I know for myself and a few people asked, kind of like going into this, it's like they're thinking of, the crosses, the priest, the screaming person who is being, that sort of thing. And a lot of people don't realize that there is a Protestant variation of exorcism. Right.
Yes. And like the Catholic Church has, like, they'll do it. Like, they have like conferences and stuff on it, but it's definitely not just a Catholic thing.
Right. Sure. So I wanted to go into today a little bit about a deeper conversation about the Protestant variation of exorcism. And it's often called deliverance ministry.
Right.
Have you heard that before?
I have heard that before, which deliverance is just like I'm guessing, you're going to have to tell me, I'm guessing the Exorcist movie was so bad for the brand that they just started calling it deliverance after that. Maybe that's too new, though. I don't know.
I should have looked that up. I actually don't know. I just know that there is a major there's a separation between the Catholic version of exorcism and this more Protestant version of deliverance. When I look into kind of like the actual differences in them, first and foremost, the Catholic Church has a very strict protocol. They have a whole assessment process about whether someone requires an exorcism. They're usually performed by a priest, somebody who is a trained professional in the Catholic Church. There's a whole procedure to it.
Right.
With deliverance ministry or deliverance protocol, it's, as far as I can tell, there is no protocol. And there is no necessarily trained person, although there are people who will claim to be specialized in the deliverance process. So it can really be performed by anyone, anywhere. And all they really have is more of a loose outline on how to recognize this demonic activity. So I would like to go into a little bit of that and what they would teach somebody on how they would spot this demonic activity, just like these young boys were taught at this Bible camp.
I'm so excited. I definitely want to know. But yeah, it's funny you do say that, because I believe you can actually submit a form, like a form to like a diocese, right? Like, and say like, oh, I'd like to have an exorcism done, please.
Yeah.
Like, you can just do that.
Yeah, and I am speaking from somebody who I was never Catholic, so this is just my understanding as an outsider. It's my understanding that you have to apply and like be assessed, and all exorcisms need to be approved by the church or by your diocese. So that's wholly opposite from what it happens in Protestant denominations. It's something that's more on the spot. If you spot it, you call it out and you just you go for it. I have my own experiences with this, which I will get into a little bit later, but I would like to let's break down a little bit what happens.
Break it down.
All right. So first thing I would like to go over is, Dan, do you know the difference between demonic possession and demonic oppression?
Man, does one have to do with the institutional powers that be, where like demons are like have been the higher class in society and therefore are the oppressors of history? Or I'm probably not, right?
No, unfortunately, no. There's no connection there. From my own experience and from my research on this, there are basically three kind of categories of this demonic activity that could affect a believer. First and foremost, before we get into oppression and possession, the first thing is temptation. It's pretty common belief that in order to have any kind of like these like more serious demonic things happening in your life, you have to open a door or give the devil a foothold, you'll often hear. So the first way in which the devil will work is that he will give you some sort of a temptation. So that's the first step. The second step, or the second kind of diagnosis here, is that of demonic oppression. So oppression is different from possession, and as far as I recall, being in the Protestant church, oppression is normally the language used. There's also this kind of belief that like Christians can't be possessed because you're filled with, you have the Holy Spirit. And so there's this kind of differentiation that like, oh no, Christians don't get possessed, but you can definitely be oppressed. So the way that they would describe that is when a demon is kind of manipulating a person's life and their environment. So the way that this would be kind of broken down is like when a person's life is going poorly, when you have a series of unfortunate events and circumstances that are really beyond a person's control. And especially if these circumstances are tied to some sort of temptation that a person has. So say somebody has we'll go with something like drugs. Someone has the temptation to do drugs. They do the drugs, their life starts to fall apart. Now you've gone from demonic temptation, you've moved into demonic oppression because your life is being affected by it.
Okay. And so far, your definitions, are they coming from a specific denomination that's describing this?
I went through as many different denominations as I could online, and they're just very different kind of wordings, but they're pretty well the same. It's that like the demonic temptation is something kind of external to you. The oppression is when you kind of give into the temptation, it starts to affect your life. Possession is like this whole other level where you've been embraced in this behavior or whatever it is. And then it's like, it's starting to control a person, which I personally never really saw growing up. It's mostly dealing in this oppression factor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 3 different levels there.
Yeah.
I guess
And just to become like to be thorough, the demonic possession definition is when there's transient involuntary loss of control of faculties and emotions. So I think that is the one that most people are familiar with from the movies. Somebody is growling, or they're like, they're floating above their bed, like in the picture behind you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So I didn't realize. So like I think I remember reading about Bob Larson, who's this guy that's supposedly an expert on demons and stuff, kind of talk about this. But like, it's interesting that there's levels to it, because like you only ever hear about the possession stuff.
Yes.
I think you hear as much about oppression, although I guess amongst Christian circles it's a thing, right? So.
Right. And I definitely, before anybody says it, because I know somebody's going to think it right now, is that this only occurs in like these really hyper charismatic movements. And yes, I grew up in that. I understand. But like the case that I brought up in the very beginning of this, this happened at a very conservative Bible camp. These kind of things, because of this underlying kind of belief system that I'm going to get into next, it can happen really in a lot of like a very, very wide variety of denominations, whether they're charismatic or not. So I broke down kind of this underlying belief system that I think this is kind of just where I thought it kind of starts off from. Underlying belief systems that would cause somebody to kind of even be susceptible to this kind of thinking. The first and foremost, there's a belief that there is like this demonic force in the world. There's this invisible, evil kind of force that is constantly kind of trying to tear a person away from their faith or whatever. There's, people could take that as far as they want, but there's this duality in the world. There's good and there's evil. The next one is this belief that the demons know your weaknesses, because how can they tempt you if they don't know your weaknesses? And the logical conclusion of that is that to know someone's weaknesses, you have to be able to read their mind. So the next step would be is that demons can read your thoughts, which like it's already pretty scary to me when I think about it now.
That is really scary, but I guess that's how they can tempt you, right? If they know what you're thinking, and then they can give you, which, like, I don't know. I guess you can still be tempted even though you have the Holy Spirit in you.
Yeah. Because there's this belief that they still know you as like a human and they understand your weaknesses. So they're going to be able to use these weaknesses against you. And those things have variation depending on what denomination you're a part of. If your denomination focuses heavily on like sexual purity, these sexual temptations are going to be at the forefront of this demonic temptation. So if it's something else like music or whatever, like there's so many different things that are considered like the highest priority of just your morality and your value system in that denomination, that's going to be your higher temptation. So it can break down, but ultimately the demon. The demon. The demon knows knows your weaknesses, so it's going to attack you in that way.
Okay.
The other one is just it kind of ties into that. It's just that because of those beliefs, that there's always this open kind of doorway for this demon to get into, or to to just disrupt your life and wreck your life.
Fuck you up. Yeah. Whenever. Even though you're saved, I guess. To be tempted by demons.
Exactly. So the next thing I'd like to go to talk about is I found probably the best list I've ever found about the signs of a demonic oppression.
All right.
Would you like to hear?
I want to know if I'm being oppressed by demons right
based on this list, I can almost guarantee you are.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, let's hear it. I want to know.
All right. So these are lists that I found on various different websites, like mainline Christian Protestant kind of denomination websites. So number 1, attack on your dreams. Number 2, mental oppression. Number 3, negative emotions.
Okay.
Number 4, intense desire for defiled things. Number 5, an untamed tongue. Number 6, sexual perversion. Number 7, involvement in the occult. Number 8, fake religions. Number 9, chronic illness. Number 10, compulsive behavior. Number 11, extreme restlessness. 12, compulsive desire for self-harm. 13, hearing voices. And 14, paranormal experiences.
Wow. Okay, so like a quarter of those can be solved by like taking an Ambient, and then like another half is just mental illness, like in various forms. And then the other ones is just like what, having a bad dream?
Right.
Like, well, okay.
Like I said, based on this list, you are currently experiencing oppression.
I'm super demonically oppressed. Holy shit. I mean, like, I'm not a part of any occults or anything, and I don't think I'm a part of any fake religions, but like all that other stuff, you could maybe argue one way or the other.
You ever had a nightmare?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I haven't. I don't know. There's a lot there.
So I feel personally offended because number 9 is chronic illness. I have a chronic illness.
Yeah, and also hearing voices, which is like that's
a mental health thing, right?
Like we have a category for that. It's
right.
schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia, right? Like that's There's a lot
we
don't know about that, but that's a thing.
I'd like to point you back to another belief that they have. The belief system is that demons can sometimes mimic these well-known conditions. They can mimic your condition. So if you are experiencing this, you don't know whether it's actually a medical issue or if you actually just have a demon that's mimicking the exact symptoms.
That's really scary.
That seems pretty dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
can see how you can if you have these beliefs, it may lead to an abuse
right.
of people who are suffering from mental illness. Like
Yeah.
it seems pretty clear that yeah, anybody who thinks that doing whatever exorcists do for these people is going to solve anything, I think probably maybe are overestimating themselves just a bit, you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Basically, it's just this idea that this this category of demonic oppression, which is like kind of like possession light, I guess you could call it. It's so broad, and there's so many different things that so many people could maybe fit into one of those categories. It sets almost everybody up in this belief system to at one point believe that they're being oppressed by a demon.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
like that's I mean, like you know, and I don't think this is we're breaking any new ground
No.
here, but like when you look at the early history of not just Christianity, but really any ancient religion that talks about people who are suffering from hearing voices or
Right.
having other kinds of like depression or things like that. Like obviously they don't use that language, but it's like it's very clear these are people who are just like suffering from mental illness
Yeah.
in some way or another, and they're using sort of this lens to kind of view their problems in their contemporary society, which now we have like better treatments for, which is great. Which I'm surprised that like the exorcists wouldn't try to go to that first, and maybe they do in the Catholic Church. I don't know. Maybe they'll be like, "Oh, you should go see a mental health professional." Like I don't know. Maybe that's the thing,
Yeah,
but
I've done a little a little bit of a look into this, and like it is my understanding that the Catholic Church does have like quite an extensive assessment protocol, and that you cannot get an exorcism whether you have already kind of ruled out whether it's mental health. And like that's a huge step. Like I think that should be the way it is anyway. But um so I don't know. Yeah, I definitely think that it sets a lot of people up for harm.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
So what else? So we've outlined demonic oppression. I'm definitely demonically oppressed.
Yes, as are
Um,
we all.
as are we all. So what else is there to this?
I think that I mean we can kind of like go into like a little bit of like why does this happen?
Yeah.
Why are people who are smart, like good functioning people in society, how does this happen that people can have this belief and kind of turn to this kind of way of processing things that are going wrong in their life? And I kind of like I tried to think this through a little bit, and I kind of came up with like this almost like a bit of a cycle that happens for people.
Mm.
I think number one is that at some point you need to be indoctrinated with these belief systems, kind of those underlying belief systems that I was talking about.
Sure.
Belief that there's this demonic force going on. And obviously, this works really well if you're doing it with children because they are young and impressionable. They don't know how to tell these things apart from truth. I think the next thing that I witnessed in my own life is that when you have those beliefs already, is that you already kind of are functioning on this like system of being kind of high alert
Mhm.
and maybe anxious overall because you have this belief about the world, and it can kind of you kind of get this confirmation bias because you are anxious and
Yeah.
because things are, nobody's life is perfect. Everybody has something that goes wrong, and if you're always interpreting that as like some sort of demonic possession, then it's just it's a form of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And then if you do go to the extent of getting treatment, I really want to make this visible, treatment
Right.
with deliverance ministry, you're already psychologically primed to have some sort of experience during it. So this whole
Definitely.
thing is a system of primed psychological states, and it's cyclical until you can kind of break out of it and you realize
I
that these things are untrue.
I think that makes sense, right? Like, when you grow up in a particular culture, you're gonna have a cultural lens that determines how you view problems in society, right? Like if we were in medieval Europe, we might talk about how you need to fix your phlegm or your cholera, your
Yeah,
cholera or whatever, right? Like maybe your blood is something's wrong there. Or if we grew up in like an ancient Chinese society or something, maybe we have to use acupuncture or something, right? Like
right.
these are like what seem kind of ridiculous for a lot of people are just the way that people have treated these issues. And a lot of medical issues are stuff that comes up and then goes away, right? Like if you
Mhm.
get the cold, for most people, you just get it and it goes away. But if you take something during that, it's like, oh, I took this thing and my cold went away, so now
Right.
you have to do this too, and it becomes kind of this cultural idea that gets passed down. So I mean, it's very clear through line to me at least that
Yeah.
yeah, people who struggle with mental illness in ancient Israel were probably subjected to exorcisms because they
Right.
thought that they were being demonically oppressed, which is awful.
Yeah, and, like, there's been quite a lot of work done to try to explain the whole thing because a lot of
Mhm.
people like, something really did happen to people.
Sure.
I know a lot of my viewpoints changed after watching, like, a lot of Darren Brown and
Yeah,
explaining how, like, you can get worked up into this frenzy in this state where you
that's
have this, like,
true.
adrenaline and there's all these things that happen, and you can actually experience some and this is where you linked it
That's
earlier
true.
to faith healing. You can
Yeah.
actually experience like some temporary relief or whatever from a physical ailment, and I can see how that can be so confusing for somebody who's wrapped up in this whole belief system. Yeah.
Right. I should be clear. I don't think it's completely the result of people struggling with mental illness, right?
Yeah,
That's
that's
painting
just
too
one
broad of
part
a
of it.
brush. That
Mhm.
it's definitely a part of it, but also it's like when you and I, Aaron, when we were Christians, right? We used to pray to God, and maybe we were in circles and in community with people, and like I would argue, I already know you would say like, yeah, there was a time where you would say you'd describe the presence of God, right? Like there's a role play there almost, like,
Right,
because you have to adopt the language and customs of the people that you're with, and then again, it's how you make sense of the world almost.
right,
And if you live in a world where spiritual forces are at work, like both holy and not holy, I guess it would
right.
make sense to see the bad things in your life as like a test or oppression or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, this can go a lot into a lot of different areas of how this affects people. One thing that I think that we can see a very kind of very obvious link right now is that this kind of thinking can set people up who are very intelligent people and have really good careers, their life's going good and everything, but because of this kind of thinking can set them up to become vulnerable to conspiracy theories and other things because
Yeah.
of the underlying belief system. This, this belief in an invisible force and this a belief in that there's something out there to take down the believers, and I think that I personally think that there is obviously some connection, whether it's wholly or just partial, to the modern day conspiracy theories that we see. I think belief in an invisible force is one of the most basic underlying things that goes throughout all of them.
Definitely. There's definitely
Yeah,
an intersection there with
yeah,
like psychologists talk about the locus of control,
right,
right? There's some people that believe that their locus of control is more internal, meaning that they believe that they have more responsibility over the things that happen in their lives, both good and bad. And some people have a more external locus, which is,
right,
having this belief that things around them are more influencing their lives. Some of course to the degree so much that it's affecting literally everything, like whether it's the
right.
government or some other spiritual force. But there's definitely a through line there.
Yeah.
So this was an interesting extended entry, Aaron. I'm glad you got to talk about it. Did you have any final notes on this topic you want to share?
Just that if you really look into the language used in these things, you may realize that this exorcism, as we see in the movies, it sounds kind of like a little bit outlandish, maybe, but when you break it down into the other kind of language that I just talked about, and with oppression or maybe just temptation, that you can see how this actually might be affecting your local churches and even the most conservative denominations, that this might be kind of in there too.
Yeah,
'Cause
like the. Oh, sorry, I didn't
I
mean
was
to
gonna
interrupt
say
you.
because I think it's more common than people would give credit for.
I think it's definitely more common too. I'd be interested in seeing what the exact stats are
Hmm.
on that, if they do exist. I will say this, right? Like Jesus was an exorcist. Like if you believe the Bible and the gospel accounts are like true stories of Jesus, then like Jesus was an exorcist. That's what he did. And that one of the things he imparted on his disciples was this ability to also do it in his name. And then of
Yeah,
course there's that controversial passage at the end of Mark that Bibles will note didn't exist in some early manuscripts that talk about, oh, and basically all believers will be able to do this too. So like I don't know, that's a big part of like that was a part of demonstrating Jesus as the Messiah, was that he had the ability to do this. So I don't know, like again I go back to what I thought about myself as a progressive Christian, how I could like figure that out, because it's like you can't say it's not real, because like that then you're just saying this story about Jesus isn't real, or he's doing something else or
Or
whatever.
meant,
I
or
don't know.
yeah, or it was just like symbolic of something else, right? Like,
Yeah, because like it's
yeah.
kind of the skeleton in the closet for some Christians, right? Because like I didn't grow up in a church that did that. I definitely didn't talk about it. So I don't know. I don't know what a lot of people would say about that. But hey, maybe you guys can tell us what you would say about it and other people. So you should definitely call into the show and talk to us if you haven't done so. Now's a great time to do it. So anyway, Erin, thanks so much for the extended entry today. I really enjoyed that. I hope you could do some more in the future.
Oh, thank you for letting me yammer on for a little while because it was
Oh
on my
yeah.
mind.
Isn't it fun? It's fun to
Oh
yammer
yeah.
on for a while. But anyway, folks, we are going to take some calls now and talk to you. But before we do that, we have to thank the patron of the week, because every single week we always give a shout out to somebody who donates on patreon.com /Patreon TW. I still quote the old link sometimes. But you know, we want to give a thanks to everybody that donates on that Patreon. But of course, we want to give a shout out to one individual in particular this week. And this week's patron of the week is going to be Charlene. Thank you so much, Charlene, for donating on that Patreon. And thanks again to everybody that donates on there. You guys rock. Just so you know, myself, Erin, all the other hosts and guests that come on, we're volunteers that do this. This show is run by a nonprofit. So when you donate on there, you are donating to the Atheist Community of Austin and helping make shows like this one and others even better. So thanks again for that. And Erin, are you ready to talk to some people?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, cool. So we have, I think, a really relevant call to your extended entry today. We have Jasmine, who's also from Canada. Jasmine from Canada calling in. What's going on?
Hi. Glad to be back. Thank you for having me again. Yeah, so I wanted to raise the issue of the exorcisms in Saskatchewan, and the whole issue kind of reminds me of the satanic panic back in the late 80s, early 90s. I looked up, there was actually I don't know, Erin, if you recall, or if you were around at that time, the Martinsville satanic sex scandal.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of families were accused of ritual satanic abuse of children, but it turned out to be false.
Yes, yeah, with like a preschool or a daycare, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it was
one of the most
expensive
civil procedures in the history of the country. It has, I mean, that's a story for another deep dive, honestly.
Yes.
It involves digging of holes to find secret passageways to satanic cult entrances and all kinds of stuff. That's a crazy story.
Very.
Anyway, Jasmine, did you have more you wanted to say on that?
Well, I want to hear what you guys think how we can go about mitigating all these problems we're seeing, like people having medical issues mistaken for spiritual issues, and how do we just reduce all the problems we're seeing right now?
Great question. Yeah. Right away, my answer is that we need to teach young people what is normal. Because when you tell a young person that these things that you're going through, because I do find that teenagers are exceptionally vulnerable to the things on that list that I mentioned earlier. I think that teaching people that these range of human emotions are normal, and that these range of kind of sexual desires are normal, and all the other things, and giving people a little bit of like a freedom to be human. I think that's a huge part of it. So then when somebody comes up to them and says like it's demonic oppression for you to be angry, they're going to be like, no, because we understand now from a psychological and health perspective that all these human emotions are completely normal and valid, and it's healthy to process my emotions in a productive way rather than like suppressing it or calling it something external from me. I think education in whatever kind of age appropriate way is a good way to start that from a young age. Anyway, I'm kind of thinking about how I could have prevented maybe as a teenager, me being a part of those movements.
Here's what I think about this. Okay. And here's my take. This may be a hot take. I don't think it is, but for some, this may be a hot take. Okay. I think the reason why we may see it in countries, especially like the United States, is because of our lack of comprehensive healthcare in this country, right? How many people have gone to spiritual events seeking aid for chronic illness or other kinds of things and eventually end up in this stuff, right? Like that seems to be a pipeline for these folks. So I think actually giving people the healthcare they need is probably going to mitigate that. But on top of the things that Erin was mentioning, talking about the education stuff, America has, in particular, I can't speak to Canadian law, but America's always had this issue where we've had a hard time defining the line between what counts as religious belief and sincere religious belief and what doesn't, right? So there's like the lemon test and stuff that tries to mitigate some of that, but it's always been a tension in this country. When I think about oh man, I can't remember the state right now that banned it, but gay conversion therapy is still a thing in a lot of places, right? There are some people like myself who would say, well, that's just abuse, that's just child abuse, and it shouldn't be a thing. There's other people that would say, well, this is our sincere religious beliefs, and this is how we think that we're best treating people. So you can't put a stop to that. We have to draw a line somewhere, right? We have to draw a line in saying, where is it child abuse and where is it just a religious practice? Because we can't let all religious practices happen, right? Like we can't just sacrifice people or do these kinds of things, even if it is a sincere religious belief, right? Even though we live in a secular society, allegedly, and want to try to keep that separation as much as possible, there has to be a line drawn. And I think, personally, I think exorcisms do draw that line, but unfortunately, I think that they are enough of a voter count in this country to where that would not change at any time in the near future, unfortunately. So in other words, I don't know if there's anything we can do on an individual level besides the stuff we always talk about, which is support critical thinking and things like that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jasmine?
Well, I wonder, just going back to the original Bible camps case, a lot of these camps, they'll at least have a nurse, if not a doctor, on duty 24.
Yes, they do.
So again, how this stuff could happen, or at least get to the point it does, is bewildering.
Right. I feel like we could take these two things and kind of put them together a little bit, that there needs to be a line and there needs to be some sort of form of mandated reporting. So if you have somebody who is a minor or somebody who is at risk to themselves or someone else, if they are reporting these things, because many of those things on that list, I would say, fall under the category of a risk to themselves or others. There needs to be this, this more laid out system that if somebody comes to their religious leader and says that this is happening, that they need to be mandated to get them help, to get them to a medical facility if they're hearing voices or if they're wanting to self-harm. These things are mandated reporting things in a psychologist's office. And so if someone is reporting this to their pastor or their youth leader or whatever, why shouldn't they be under the same kind of control and this area of protection that a psychologist would, because it's the same thing. And so the line needs to be more differentiated, less gray area, and there needs to be more of a protocol to how to try to keep people from getting harmed in the way that they have in the past.
Right. Now, I don't know how it was. I know that we both were camp counselors at one point. And the camp I worked at, right, there was a legal mandate. I can't remember if it was nationally inputted or just by the state of Texas, to where if you saw abuse, child abuse, like sexual abuse or, physical violence of that nature, you had to report it. I had to, as a counselor there, had to report. They had stations where you could put little cards in there to be anonymous, or they had a hotline you could call for that. The problem is, of course, what if your camp is doing the exorcisms?
That's where I talk about that's why I talk about this gray line. Yes, I agree. Also, camp counselor, there was definitely mandated, you had to report if somebody had physical abuse or sexual abuse. But where is the mental health component to it? And because that's the gray area where it falls into the spiritual area, that needs to be more clear because as far as I can recall, there wasn't a whole lot of that unless the person was, claiming very outwardly that they were going to hurt somebody. There's a lot of these other gray area things where they are still at risk for harm for themselves or others that fall under spiritual and nowhere near the mandated level where you should actually call in the medical professionals. So that needs to be sorted out because it's a problem.
Yeah, I think, we've only gotten away with it for so long, at least in the US. I can't speak to Canada just because there is a large charismatic movement here, like more so than a lot of places that have a lot of influence on how that stuff gets regulated. But also, like, there's probably hasn't been enough. Well, I mean, obviously there are cases that go to court and stuff, right, over this stuff. But like, it's because of the child sex abuse stuff that happens at Christian camps in churches and stuff that the current abuse laws we have are in place. Like those were not always the thing. Those are a pretty recent development within the past few decades or so, right? I am surprised that we haven't done the same thing for these churches. But again, it's like, how do you then you are telling people what they can and can't do with their religious beliefs, and that's where people have a problem. It's like it's I don't know how to legislate that.
Right.
So anyway, Jasmine, we don't have answers. I think that's the short of it. I think we have a lot of complaints and we can identify the problem pretty coherently, but as far as what we can do, I don't know. I'll report it whenever I see it. If I ever suspect it, I'll tell you that much. So maybe other people could do the same, but I don't know. That's all I got. What do you think, Jasmine?
Oh, maybe we have to regulate the camps a little better. I mean, it shouldn't have happened. You'd think we would have gotten past this in the 90s and even the 80s, but like you say, it's a hard problem to address, and I guess that's it. That's all I wanted to discuss at this point, I guess.
Right. I think that's a fair point
for this show, and thank you for having me again.
Of course, Jasmine. Thanks so much for calling in. And I agree. It's a hard topic because, like, what do you say? Do you make a law that says no exorcisms? Well, what does that mean? Like, how do you do that? Do you say no touching kids? I agree with that. Probably shouldn't touch kids, but there's probably some situations where if you are, say, a doctor or a camp nurse, where you have to touch the kid, right? Like that, I can see how that's a thing. So I mean, but if this is counted as care, if they're like demonically oppressed, I don't know. Maybe you have to identify it in some way. I don't know. Maybe some other people smarter than me have looked into policy solutions on this, but
I do feel like if it wouldn't take very much effort for a group of 20 people, from each church to sit down and go over the ethics of this and find at least a starting point of where is our line for now, a workable line, right? Like if a person is complaining of like what we keep going back to this one, like hearing voices, let's take that off of our list of primarily a spiritual concern and let's immediately assume that it's more likely to be a mental health concern. And let's treat them for that first.
Yeah.
I feel like it's laziness and it's negligence on a lot of these denominations' parts.
I think so too. We may have a caller that might actually disagree with us. So we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, real quickly, I have to tell you guys about how you can support the show. I already mentioned you can do that through Patreon. You'll get your name shouted out before we take calls, and that's always going to be a thing. But there's also other ways you can support the show, including by becoming a member. If you click that join button there on YouTube, you become a member. So if you watch the show live, you get access to all the little emoticons and stuff in the chat. And you can do that for as little as 99 cents. So definitely please consider doing that if you haven't already. And also, if you shop on Amazon, you can support the ACA at no cost to you. You just have to visit tiny.cc/Amazon Smile ACA. And you can designate the Atheist Community of Austin as your selected charity. And Amazon will donate a portion of their profit directly to the ACA. So if you already get your shopping done on Amazon, like that's just something you can just click on and do. So definitely consider doing that if you haven't already. And of course, we really appreciate it. And now I think we have somebody who disagrees with us. Let's find out. We're talking to Paul, who's also calling in from Canada. Paul, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, how you guys doing today?
I'm doing okay. This is kind of a sad topic, but I see that, at least according to the call screener, that you believe that demonic possessions are real and that mental health issues are manifestations of demonic possessions. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, if you look at a lot of the ways that mental health affects people, like especially things like schizophrenic, I know we can explain it with the anatomy of the body, but if you look at the way it makes people act, right, the way that they describe, it's kind of hard for us to comprehend or explain, especially if you look at like addiction, right? Like addiction will take a person and it's unexplainable. You get addicted to something, you can't come off of it. It takes away your empathy, it takes away your humanity, your compassion. People leave their children, people commit suicide, all because they're addicted to something. Like, how do you rationalize that if not something's controlling you, right? Something exterior from yourself, even from the realm of reality, is actually driving your body.
Okay.
Don't you think that that's something more that, you understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying, and I don't think it's anything more at all. Like you've already mentioned that there is in fact a genetic component to mental illnesses like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, and lots of other mental illnesses, and addiction. Obviously, there's a lot of studying about addiction science and a lot of things that we don't know, but like we know how it starts. It starts because you're putting chemicals into yourself, and you develop a relationship with those chemicals. I don't have an addiction to alcohol because I don't really drink alcohol that much. It's not a thing that affects my life. But if I started to drink every day, I might develop an addiction. Like there's a very clear cause and effect relationship there. I don't really see how demons have anything to do with it.
Well, it's not really cause and effect, right? So the studies now, they're seeing that addiction isn't so much genetic. They're actually saying it's not genetic at all. But what they are saying is it's associated with traumas, right? So
Yeah,
experience traumas.
First,
You know what? The studies aren't saying that they're demons.
they are definitely not saying
mean,
that they're demons. I think I know what you're talking about, and there is definitely some current research into the effects of trauma and addiction. I think that it's a very valid field that is being explored right now, and I think it's fascinating. I don't think that they've ruled out the effects of genetic and environmental effects of addiction. But let's go back to like just what you had mentioned earlier about the mental health things.
Different.
I'd like to go back to this idea of the mental health thing, and like if it is not something that is happening kind of on a physical level too, I'm curious on how you would explain that, like when somebody seeks mental health care and they get mental health treatment and they are given medications, they get better. Do the demons in your world, do you respond to chemicals in that way?
Well, they do get, but if you look at like schizophrenics, for instance, they're known for not taking their medications, right?
No,
they're one of the biggest ones where they stop taking their meds, right? So something inside them
that is not answering the
not
question. Oh, that's not answering the question that I asked. If a person who was diagnosed with schizophrenia and was being treated under an accurate, a proper health protocol, and they were taking medication and they responded positively to that, is it in your opinion here that the demons respond or are somehow muted because of the chemicals in the medication? What is going on there if it is a spiritual thing?
It's not so much responding as it is suppressing, right? So if you have the chemicals in your brain that are interacting a certain way and you take medications, you're suppressing those parts of your brain that are backfiring, right? So it's not healing you. Medication never heals these mental illnesses. They suppress them. So you're changing the chemical compounds in your brain, right? So obviously,
I have an inflammatory disease in my body, and when I take medication, it suppresses the inflammation, and that's a good thing, right? I'm treating my disease when I take my medication.
But you're not stopping, right? And I'm talking more with
because I have an autoimmune disease and I can't get rid of it, but I treat it because we have science and we're able to treat it. How would a demon explain better than just I have a genetic disorder? How would a demon explain that anomaly in my body rather than this understandable deficiency, and we need to treat it in a way that we have found? How would a demon better explain that?
When they talk about demons, it's not so much ailments like autoimmune diseases. It's more something that controls you, right? Like in the Bible, when Jesus cast the demon out of the man into the pigs, he was certainly acting like a schizophrenic, right? So that's just the part. It says that he casted a whole bunch of demons out of Mary Magdalene, right?
So it's just mental health things.
Yeah.
In line depression, right? So I'm not saying that obviously we're not going to call the. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just really quickly, it sounds like you're driving right now. Are you driving?
No.
You're not driving?
Why is it?
Oh, okay.
No, I got it's a tap, the shower. My girlfriend's in the shower.
Okay. We just wait. If you're driving, we don't want to talk to you while you're, on the phone. It's just something
want you
that
safe.
we just want you safe. So please continue.
Yeah. So like I was saying, like with addiction, for instance, right? We'll use that as an example because that's one of those things where it's not a mental health issue in the sense that it's genetic. It's a mental health issue in the sense that something else externally is controlling you, right? And if you've experienced it,
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true.
Paul, I don't know if we provide some evidence for that. Yeah,
I don't know if we've
those
ruled.
claims.
I don't know if we've ruled out a genetic component. I don't know that. There's a lot. Let me tell you, Paul. There's a lot we don't know about study of addiction, right? There is a lot of complex biological phenomenon that are happening that I'll be honest, I'm not qualified to talk about, and Erin isn't either. And MD Aware could probably give you a better answer than us. But the point is, right? Erin's point is, there is a illness and there is a treatment and there is a response to that, right? That whole thing that's happening there, that's a physical process. At no point does the spiritual need to be invoked at all, right? I mean, the question that we're asking here, which I'm not sure if we even got an answer for yet, but except for maybe it's suppressing it, but that just implies that demonic oppression can be suppressed through drugs. Like if I have an illness that's being treated through medication and I respond positively to that and I go about my day just fine, what's the demon doing in all that? Is the demon just hiding? Is it reacting to the drugs? Is it just what is the role that demonology has to play in this?
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? As far as what we know about the physical world, we're obviously not going to call it demon possession. So I'm not saying we're going to get a medical term. What I'm saying is the way that the body is acting certainly appears the way the Bible describes demonic possession, especially addiction. I see what you're saying where medications come in and they suppress certain things, right? Then you got to take more medications. People don't want to take their medications, right? But if you look at addiction, for instance, it's a perfect example of something exterior driving you. People do things they can't comprehend when they're in addiction. There's no cure for it.
I do think that I did hear you kind of, I don't know if you got cut off, but I heard you mention a particular person who's currently studying this, a Canadian physician who I have read his books, Dr. Gabor Mate, and I find his work fascinating, and he is looking into these more these less conventional ways of we're looking at things like addiction and chronic illness. I find his work very fascinating. I don't think that anywhere in his book he proposed that any of it was demons. He's a doctor and he has worked to maybe substantiate the idea that these psychological traumas can have an effect on our bodies, that there is a connection between our experiences, our attachment styles, our trauma, and what happens in our bodies on a physiological level. So I don't think that where you're pulling your source from is saying what you think it says. I think that he is encouraging people to look at more of the psychological effects and, these longer term outcomes of how can we treat things like addiction and mental health issues and physical issues by getting people proper psychological care. So I wonder if you're maybe reading into it a little bit more, that what he is saying of things like addiction being connected to trauma, and there has been some work on that, of whether you are reading into that and making it fit in your worldview that demons are involved.
Well, even beyond that too, right? Like doctors are interested in providing healthcare to patients, right? They want to have the best life outcomes, and sometimes that means involving cultural practices. There is the field of anthropology that looks at this and says, well, maybe if we engage in some of these rituals, either through the placebo effect or whatever, like that's actually going to be helpful for individuals. I guarantee you, Paul, and you can happily prove me wrong, but anybody who has a diagnosis of a schizoaffective disorder or schizophrenia, who is healed by somebody who did an exorcism on them and not through a repeated medication, I'd be happy to hear it, and the medical community would be happy to hear it, because that is groundbreaking. As far as I know, that's not something you can heal from. That's something that affects you for pretty much your whole life, right? Again, I'm not an expert on that, but that's how it is for at least most people. I know that much.
Yeah.
So,
And if they're able to take that case and make, predictions about the future and continue to
Right.
see this, replicated over and over
Yeah.
again, and we have a new treatment for psychosis via exorcism, that would
Yeah.
be fantastic.
That would be great.
I would
but
love to hear it.
I don't think that exists. I know
But-
there's a story of a man who put demons into a pig, and that's just it. It's just a story. I don't think that's ever happened in real life, and I don't think we have evidence of it, Paul. So I don't know. What do you think?
So I think that there's people that claim they've been divinely healed from pretty much every ailment, including schizophrenia, autoimmune disease. You can find people say that. Whether it's true or not is another thing. But if we're going by eyewitness, I mean, there's people that say they've been healed from everything. Second,
Yeah.
I already said that Dr. Mate is obviously not going to call it demonic possession. But what he does say, if you're reading Dr. Mate's book, you know that there is no explanation for addiction. All they have is trauma, and that's pretty much where it ends for him. Now, the point is the way people react to these addictions, the things that they do, right? It takes away your humanity, your empathy. It takes away your ability to rationalize, use logic. People ditch their kids. People take their own lives. How do you explain that? You can say
you explain that because they have a mental disorder, Paul. Like, look,
no,
if I got
it's an addiction.
Paul,
it's an exterior source.
That is
it's not
that's a disorder, Paul.
And that
That's
is one person's
disorder.
analysis of what is going on. You are completely denying the fact of all of the other worldwide research that has been done on it and other ways that we have been able to treat, explain, and prevent addiction in people. So I like I said, I appreciate Dr. Mate's what his whole thing of incorporating a more holistic approach and psychological and approach to addiction, but he's not the guru. He's not the final say in this. And you can't take his word. You cannot take one person's study into as scripture. Essentially, he's one person.
It's like, look, mental illness has the ability to make people make decisions that are not in their self-interest, right? That we would consider irrational. You know what else does that? Taking drugs. If I took LSD right now, I would do the same thing. Why? Because chemicals are being affected in my body. Again, it's completely physical. We don't have to have a point by point, line by line to figure this out, right? The drug goes in, weird stuff comes out. If I got injured in the head right now, if I got hit by a car and had a permanent brain damage from that, that's going to affect my decision-making abilities and the things that I would do, because we know that the brain is the source of where we make our decisions, right? Like there's, again, I don't need to cite demons to be able to say, well, that's the most likely explanation.
And honestly, Dan, it would be dehumanizing of me to say that you no longer care about people because you were under some sort of substance, or like, you are different, you have no empathy and you don't care about anybody because you're under the influence of some sort of a drug. Like you're still a human being and deserve to be treated as such. So
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But anyway, Paul, that's really all the time we got. All the time we got for this call. I hope that you weren't lying and that you aren't driving, but
stay safe, Paul. We care about
whatever
you.
you're doing. Okay. But look, I would just say, like, demons are not the first thing that comes to mind for me when things are happening to people, right? And also that's a very culturally specific idea too. Like demons are not necessarily a universal idea across cultures. I mean, are there forms of it in a lot of cultures? Sure, but like that's you can't just say, oh, it's because of the demons of Judaism that are going to be the culprits of this, right? And even then, again, like we live in the 21st century. Almost everybody in America has smartphones. There's hundreds of thousands of churches in this country. If somebody wants to show like a real exorcism, somebody with bona fide medical diagnosis, not just a story. I know everybody has stories, but we got stories for Reiki healers too, right? Like, and shows that a mental illness that previously could not be cured quote unquote like schizophrenia, again, as far as I know, it's not something that you can just completely rid yourself of. Like that would be something that would indicate something. But what I do know is that we take drugs, whether it be for recreational purposes or for medical purposes, and it changes us. And that's good enough for me. That's all the explanation I need. I don't need to incite spiritual forces to explain why people act irrationally. I don't know. But hey, that's the end of that call. Real quick, I got to show you guys some of the other shows that happen here at the Atheist Community of Austin. So definitely check out this promo and see what we got going on.
We are reckoning with really powerful forces. You know, I'd like to think that we can experiment and play around with our gender in a casual way, but I also want to say that these things are really fundamental to who we are as a person.
Unbroken love or something, which is not what Hitler meant by it. So if you could help me with that, that would be great.
Oh boy, this is the episode where I get to talk about Hitler. Wow.
My grandfather used to refer to clergymen in a certain way, and he's right in this case. He always used to say, "Here comes the gravy train of an easy life." And without a shadow of a doubt, this is Jesus pimping.
Do you get these kind of situations where you have like a female frog with like 6 or 7 males like stacked up? Well, I think it'd be hilarious being a female frog jumping around with like this 7th male frog orgy tower going on behind you.
If you're going to make assertions that your God is the only living God, when I ask you why you believe that your God is a living God, you don't get to say, how do you expect me to do that? You were supposed to show up with your A game. It's not my fault that you aren't ready to defend what you believe.
Header back goes there, some nice instruction to give yourself a big old orgasm, or better yet, give someone else one. And so when this arrived, of course, my partner needed to verify the efficacy of this pillow, you know, for science. And so I would just like to say from the bottom of my heart, this may be the only time I can actually say this and it be accurate, but Mr. Greg James, executive producer of the Atheist Community of Austin, thank you for the job.
And we are back to the show. Real quickly, before we move on to other callers, I just want to tell you about a couple other ways you can check out things related to this show, including our merch store. We, of course, are always rocking new merch every single month in our merch store. We have a new t-shirt of the month that's happening. I came up with the concept of this one. I like it a lot. It says lizard people are people too. And one of my favorite shirts that we've done so far. And obviously I'm biased, but I think it's pretty good. Also, we got all the other t-shirts, hoodies, hats, phone cases, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you want to support TruthWanted that way. Links to that in the description, tiny.cc/merch ACA. Really fun stuff. You can also listen to audio only versions of this show if you go to our YouTube channel that hosts all of the shows there. It's tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. And you can listen to everything, not just TruthWanted, but Talk, Heathen, Atheist Experience, and all the other fun stuff that we do here. So check that out if you haven't already. And also, real quickly, I have a special announcement I need to make here. So the holiday season is coming up. If you guys have been around for a while, you know that in the past couple of years, we've been doing some fun stuff at the end of the year. This year, we're going to try to do something really fun as well. So all of the hosts of the ACA shows are going to head into a team contest. But we need your guys' help for this, okay? So if you go to the link in the description, it's tiny.cc/ACA Holiday Survey 2022. We want you guys to answer as many questions as you can and be a part of the mayhem, okay? We need your participation. So as a special reward for helping out, we'll be selecting some respondents at random and sending them a special gift. So click that link, get in on the action, and watch the hosts of the ACA duke it out this December. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say this, but TruthWanted will be representing as a team in this competition. So hopefully, if we're all available, expect me, Aaron, and MD Aware to rock it out. That's right. I'm not repping Talk Heathen. Truth Wanted is where it's going to be at this year. So this is going to be fun. But again, no other spoilers from there. So please click on the link in this survey, and you might be selected for a gift. So check that out. Also, on September 25th, if you were in Austin or you want to make plans to be in Austin, consider joining us in studio live at the ACA Free Thought Library for Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen, of course, starts at 1 p.m. Atheist Experience at 4:30. The doors are going to be open at noon for that, and parking is where you can find a legal spot. We don't have a lot of it, so you gotta go quick. If you can't make it there this month, we will continue broadcasts from the library at the last Sunday of each month. So keep watching this show and the website, atheist-community.org, for news and information as we expand our in-studio offerings in the near future. And I'm going to be on Talk Heathen. Actually, I'm going to be the one hosting with a special guest. So look forward to that. Someone who hasn't made an appearance in a long time. That's your only hint on that. So look forward to those shows. And please come out down to Austin and say hi. We're so happy that we get to see people again. Erin, I'm sorry. I know you're stuck in the land of the North, but one of these days,
Someday I will. Someday I will.
Someday you will. Someday you will. Okay, so we got a couple other callers. Have you been looking at this call list here, Erin?
I have. Yeah.
Okay, who do you want to talk to next? We got a couple people.
Honestly, I like all of them.
I like all of them. Okay,
I like them.
Let's talk to Allison. Allison calling in from Washington. How about that? Allison, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Oh, I'm just watching you guys on YouTube. Well, not this particular episode, but I've been watching you guys, following you guys loosely, and I'm just losing my religion, and I don't. It's hard to do. It's, you know, I feel like I'm alone, and I feel like it's your guys' fault. So now you have to help me.
Okay, all right. Well, I don't know if it's our fault. I think, you have to be, we all have our own journeys, right? Maybe we're bad influences on you, but hey, I will tell you this much. You are definitely not alone. I promise you're not alone. There's people who go through the same thing every single day. Erin and I both went through this, and partly for me too was watching shows similar to this one. So welcome aboard. Welcome, welcome to the crazy stream. But okay, so you're struggling with it though. It sounds like tell me about your struggles there. What's going on?
Oh no, I think his name is Matt. Sorry, I don't know all of your guys' names. I've kind of just followed you guys loosely since the first time I got kicked out of church in 2016. But he was just talking about the finality of death and, how Christianity kind of, makes you afraid to die. But I've always lived on the edge. I'm a drug addict. And so I was never really accepted in the church anyways. And so,
yeah, so it sounds like is it the fear of death that's holding you back here, or is it fear of the unknown maybe that's giving you a pause?
That just all of it, just all of it. Like, I mean,
it's a big deal, right? This whole thing is a really big deal.
Yeah,
and it could be a bit of a shock when you start to kind of working through these things and realizing that you just can't turn to those things in the same way that you have in the past. I don't know what your situation is, and it sounds like you've had some rejection from your community, your church community already,
which is never a good feeling.
Yeah, I wanted to say I'm sorry to hear that, and I think it's really brave and courageous for you to take a look at these beliefs and to be going through this, and it is hard. But there are good things along the way, and there's a lot to discover. And each step of the way, I know for myself, I discovered myself along the way, and I discovered people that I aligned with my values, and I was able to just really take a good long look at all the things that I had going on in my life and decide kind of what things I wanted to put my focus on. I think you had mentioned, I don't know who you had mentioned. What's that guy's name again? Matt. I've heard of him before too.
Matt,
I think D something. Anyway, I may have seen a video, I think, of that guy once or twice too when I was going through my whole process, and it was shocking at first. But I sometimes I needed a little bit of that to like shake me awake a little bit, because realizing that I was in a situation that was actually doing a little more harm than good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I mean, thanks for calling in. Thanks for watching our show. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, I mean, was there more you wanted to say to that, Allison?
Oh, of course. I'm just full because, I was, like a lot of us, I was indoctrinated from a young age. And so now I'm just here. I just feel like, oh my God, I feel like there's nobody else in this town. Like, I feel like I'm by myself, and that really sucks. And so the only thing I can do is stay connected to people like you to walk me through this, because I want to run back to Jesus, because that's all I know. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, I have just kind of felt alone, because like just being African American in this area is very lonely. And then, you get a lot of kind of unwanted attention. This town's it was kind of backwards. Like,
sure.
They had like, I'm not sure if I don't want to get you guys kicked off of YouTube. I don't want to say too much, but they've had certain types of groups march in parades.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Listen, I'm familiar with the backwaters of Washington State. Okay. You got a lot of militia groups out there and a lot of people that have a lot of feelings. Yeah, definitely.
All the junk that I went through growing up here in the public school system, just the way I was treated and stuff like that. I was just always taught that, just turn the other cheek and Jesus has got you. And vengeance belongs to the Lord. But I keep waiting and I keep waiting, and like bad things keep happening, and God just keeps not showing up. And so I'm just like, well, I just have to admit it. Like, maybe there is no God.
Yeah, it's so hard. It's so hard. I know. Allison, I want to, it's,
sorry.
Allison,
no, you're totally fine. No, here.
You're okay.
I want to give you two things here, Allison. First thing, I want you to write this down if you can. Okay, if you're able to do that. There's an organization called Recovering from Religion, and we recommend their services all the time. They are people who you can call up on the phone, and they have the training and the background and the experience to talk you through like what you're going through and some of those experiences, and they have all the time in the world for you. They will be able to talk to you and get you plugged into the resources that you need. Unfortunately, with this show, we can talk to you for a couple minutes, and we can talk to you, but we have other callers that we talk to for this. So I want to make sure that you get the help that you need by going to that organization. And I'm sure if you look in the live chat right now, you said you're watching on YouTube, there's other people that you can talk to in the chat, I guarantee, that are willing to talk to you and help you out. Because I promise you, as hard as it seems, being in a small town and thinking you're the only one who thinks that, I've been there. You want to know where I'm from? I'm from Waco, fucking Texas, Allison. The town that's known for two things: HGTV shows about old houses and a big cult in the 90s. That's like it. That's our two cultural exports, okay? And when I grew up in Waco, Texas, I thought I was all alone. There were no atheist organizations near me. There was a secular student alliance at Baylor that is now defunct, and was never officially recognized by Baylor University either, because it's a secular organization. And I eventually got down here to Austin, Texas, because I needed to move my ass down here, amongst other things. But that was a big reason, so that I could be a part of this community right here, which is the Atheist Community of Austin, and to prove that I didn't have to be alone anymore, that there is a community that exists and is willing to talk to you. And I know that feeling of being stuck in a small town and feeling like there's nobody to talk to, but that you are not alone. I promise you, you're not. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised the amount of people that might feel the same way. Now, I don't necessarily suggest you go around saying, "Hey, I'm an atheist. Are you an atheist?" Because sometimes people give you weird looks, and it's hard to do that. But there's definitely resources you can look to. You can definitely talk to people who are professionals at this, who can give you the help you need, because it is an emotionally taxing journey. Erin and I
Yeah.
can both speak to that. We both have issues that we've had to work on, and philosophies and worldviews that we had to deconstruct because
Right.
Christianity taught us some bullshit.
Yeah.
It really did.
Yeah. Allison, when you're talking there, first of all, it doesn't scare me away. It doesn't scare
Yeah.
us away.
Nope.
When you're talking there, all I did was just have a memory, and I feel your pain to my bones. Like I feel it so deeply.
Yeah.
How upsetting and scary and chaotic it can feel in that moment. So please hear that like we've been there. Many other people in the community have been there, and there are, like Dan said, recovering from religion, and there are other communities of that some that are connected to us here too, like on our Discord. There's people on there that you can talk to. We're trying to build community here, and places that you can ask for resources, ask if people are local to you, trying to build things outside of that church that sounds like they had already been, in a way kind of standoffish with accepting you wholly anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry that you're going through this, but I'm also like filled with a lot of of pride. I feel really proud of you for taking that step, because it's a huge step.
Yes,
So
it is
just
a huge step. And
Yeah.
you know what? I'm personally quite honored that you decided to call into us. I know that you
Right.
don't know
Me
us super
too.
well, but that gives us a level of trust in knowing that that you think what we're saying is true, at least, and we want to help, and that's what we want to do. And you'll find there's a lot of other atheists in this community who feel the same way, who are at the exact place that you are at right now. And I promise you, it gets better. It does. It really does. But it does take time. It doesn't happen in a day. There's a lot of stuff you got to figure out, but it does get better. So, Allison, hopefully you got all that.
Just rewatch it.
We were talking for a bit. Yeah, it's gonna be on YouTube, so you can rewatch that in case you need to look at that. But did we help you out there at least a little bit?
Yeah.
Yes, because I was really kind of hysterical when I called, because it's like, oh man, because you don't talk about, being a drug addict and not believing in God. Like, oh my God, that's a double whammy. I'm really going to hell now. And I made it public that I'm broken. Like, oh no, I have to show the joy of the Lord. And
Isn't that interesting?
I'm worried.
But isn't that interesting,
All right,
Allison?
well.
Isn't that interesting that you feel a sense of guilt for talking about your current life experiences and what you're going through? See, like that's something that Christianity does. Is you're absolutely right. It's like they tell us you have to represent Christianity well by showing the joy of the Lord and showing that you have a Holy Spirit, right? Like that's a thing.
Yeah. Yes, so that I can show others the way. And it's like, dude, I don't even know the way. I can't really, I can't really, it's just hard. It's like the deeper I go down this trail, it's like I almost have to do the drugs to kind of help myself from just losing it. And I know that that's just sick. It's completely sick thinking, but oh man, it's just I went deep with it. I used to walk the town with a cross that I made.
Hey, relatable. I used to walk around the building 7 times doing like Jericho walk, trying to make things happen. So.
Yeah. And Allison too, like
the walls fall down. Yes. Yeah.
Allison, you're not even the first person that's called or been on this show that has struggled with drug addiction and has had a problematic relationship with Christianity. Like you're like you would be surprised how many other people have gone through a similar thing. But look, I gotta say we're coming to the end of the time that we have for this call.
In this format,
and we're just I also want to reiterate that Erin and I are just giving our perspectives. We are absolutely not medical health professionals, so I can't give you any advice there. But please go look back and look up the resources that we mentioned, and feel free to take a look in the chat. I'm sure there's people there that can give you those resources too. And then I'd be curious, Allison, when you're in a place where you feel like you can talk to us more, and when you've kind of gone through some things, I'd love to hear where you're at. Maybe you decide that it is real, or maybe you've distanced yourself from it a bit. But it sounds like you're in a place where we at least want to get you the help that you need, right? So again, that's all the time we got here. But I really appreciate you calling in and giving
Yeah.
us your perspective. And one thing we won't do, Allison, is we will not shame you for your drug use. We will not shame you for feeling like that you can't live up to an expectation that is not fair for anyone to go up to. Okay.
Thanks.
So
Thank you. Thank you.
course.
Thank you. Goodbye.
course.
Thank you.
Goodbye, Allison. You have a great one. Okay.
Take care.
Oh, gosh,
Thanks for
that was
calling.
tough.
I know. I feel like my heart just kind of like, oh, I feel that moment when you're like, maybe there is no God. That was terrifying in the moment.
It's hard to say out loud, isn't it? I remember
Oh,
the
yeah.
first time I said it out loud.
Me too.
It's
Yeah.
it's a hurtful thing. And like Christianity, churches prey on people that struggle with drug addiction and struggle with mental illness. And I would not be surprised if that's what is happening with Allison. Again, I don't know her whole story, but obviously she's describing that there's a relationship there going on. And I don't think it's out of the possibility that she could have been taken advantage of because of that. I think a lot of people are. And it's very sad to see. But hopefully, again, we point you to some resources, to some professionals that can really help you with some of that deeper stuff. But for now, Erin and I are happy to give our experiences and how we've gone through the ringer with Christianity, because it is tough. But that call, that did something.
Oh
to
God,
me,
that got you right in the feels, didn't it, John?
Yeah. Man. But we gotta keep going here. I think we have time for one, maybe two more calls. We'll see. But first, before we do that, I need to let you guys know how you can contact us. Again, I'm on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan. But if you want to email the show, you can do that. It's truth@atheist-community.org, or you can reach out to the ACA at tv@atheist-community.org and see what's going on our website at atheist-community.org. And that email, by the way, doesn't just go to me, the truth@atheist one. That also goes to Erin and everybody else that does stuff for TruthWanted. So if you want to talk to Erin or anybody else, you can do that too. And there's also a Facebook group. It's run by fans and it's for fans. You can go to tiny.cc/FBTWG to interact with other fans there. Check that out if you haven't already. It is a cool place to be. And with that, let's see. I'm gonna try for one more, maybe two. Don't know if we got time for it all, but let's talk to Jamie. Jamie, who's calling in from Texas. Jamie, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
It's me again, the weird Englishman. So, listening to Allison did bring up the topic I wanted to cover. When you don't have religion giving you these comfortable platitudes for trauma, things like if a loved one passes away, my gran recently passed, and 95% of the time, I can sit here and go, ha ha ha, you're in your superstitions, so unfounded, so irrational, no proof. But then in those times of trauma, I kind of feel jealous almost, like I wish I could share in that comfortable delusion that the person I love is somewhere better.
Yeah.
And I'm just wanting to get maybe your thoughts on ways, especially since I have the luxury of not having been brought up particularly religious. I was Christian, Roman Catholic, but it was performative. My mom just wanted to mollify my grandparents, but so I was never indoctrinated. How do you take care of yourselves? How do you find self-care, especially in times of trauma, when you don't have faith to fall back on?
Yeah, so I'll talk to this first, and then I definitely want to hear Erin's perspective. First, again, just want to emphasize, just like with the last call, I'm not a medical professional, so I'm not an expert on trauma or any of that. I'm just a guy who's read books, right? And that's it, and also talks on the internet. So that's the first thing I need to get out of the way. So I can only talk to my own experience, right? So like for me, I've said, I think I'm on record in the past of saying I didn't really have trauma out of it. looking back on that, I think maybe I did. I think I maybe processed it and just didn't realize that maybe it was trauma. But like just like how Allison was saying, where there's a sense of shame and a sense of guilt because you're not following up to these Christian standards. Like I definitely felt some of that, and it was definitely hard for me to talk about issues related to mental health, for example, because I thought that again I had to be expressing the joy of the Lord and things like that, right? I have to be this good Christian boy, and good Christian boys don't have issues with their mental health because they're saved by the Holy Spirit. I mean, that's it may not be said out loud, but that's kind of the implied thing. So how did I get through that? Well, for me, I eventually got involved with the Atheist Community of Austin, and I was also involved with other atheist groups, right? So like that's not going to be a thing that everybody needs. There's a lot of people that just leave it and they're fine and they don't need to be a part of an atheist thing. Who cares? That's weird for some people, right? But for me, it was good because I got to talk to other people about my related experiences and I got to find community in that. That's one of the biggest draws that churches have. And as you've rightfully pointed out, right? You're like, oh, there's a comfort there in that, ultimately a delusion, but like there is a comfort in shared experiences and being able to share a culture. I lost a cultural connection to my other Christian friends when I decided to renounce my faith because I couldn't express my feelings the same way. I couldn't talk about how the Holy Spirit filled me up that week or how I prayed for something to happen and then something happened for me because it just didn't make sense for me anymore. So instead, I got to talk about my religious experiences with other people in the atheist community. And we're able to talk about what that did to me and how other people are coping with that and how people have really gotten over that and how people are talking with their other family, right? So like that's why communities like ours exist. It's not because we just want to, shit on Christianity all day. I mean, we do a lot of that, but it's also because like we want to exist as people who have experiences who are trying to figure this out too,
Yeah.
So that's my thing with that. It is community. It really is finding other people to be able to talk about your troubles with and relating to that. What do you think, Erin?
It's a big topic. It's honestly, it's probably the biggest and most complicated topic on a really human person-to-person level that comes up in our community. I think that when it comes to things like grief, I think that is a topic that isn't, it is understood, but it's also not understood.
Sure.
And they're even in completely secular, non-religious forums, they're still looking at how and when and what do we do to process our trauma. I do think that Dan is absolutely right about community. So much about what we feel comfort in when we're involved in religious, environments is the community. I think there is also this idea that you're doing something when you pray, realizing that is just kind of, it's placating. It's something that's more of a bypass of actually processing it. For myself, I don't know how else to answer this other than just to say what I did for myself. When it came to things that I needed comfort in, it was looking to the people in my life that I felt safe around and actually drawing on real life human people rather than an imaginary person that didn't actually come through ever. And going to modalities like trauma counseling and processing these things and the real evidence-based things that we know help people process their emotions and their traumas and their grief. This is, I would say, like a working hypothesis on how to deal. I don't think that by any means think that we've reached some epitome of human development that we know what to do now. But I think we're on a better path now than we were when we would just say a few words into the ether and think that did anything. I don't think it did anything for people on a personal level or on a community level. I think it was a bit of a bypass. So I think one thing that has helped me too, when I feel that lack, because it took a while for me when I first deconverted to not want to pray, when I had to kind of remind myself that like it didn't do anything.
Yeah.
It actually didn't do anything. It was tricking me into thinking something was happening. It was tricking me to thinking I was processing something. It was a bypass. And what I can actually do is these plethora of other options. So I don't know, for me, for grief, it would be doing something that honors the connection I had with that person. Again, talking as a layperson, just in my own experience. trauma, going to a trauma counselor and doing things that are evidence-based like EMDR or whatever else there is out there. There are other options. And they take a lot more work. They take a lot more work than just praying.
Yep, it's true.
Yeah.
That's about all I've got for you today, Jamie.
Well, I won't take too much more of your time, though I have stories about my experience with faith healing and things like that, which I'll call in again some other time.
Please do.
But
I love talking about that.
I'll leave you with this. The way I've dealt with it is realizing that the person who's passed, their pain is over, and you can. Their immortality is in your memories of them. That's really all we have as humans, is the impact we leave on the world we leave behind when we're gone. And absolutely treasure and marvel in the wonder that is the universe. You don't need a god or a dogma to understand that this world and this universe is magical. Adam Savage put it wonderfully that science is tangible magic. And if you don't think the fact that the sky is beautiful and the birds sing and the sun rises every day, not because God said so, because that's how it should be, that's how it is because of natural forces, that brings me solace. Like, the world is beautiful. Live in it.
When Jamie.
Thank you for that.
I got a snap. I got a snap
yes,
for that.
Yes.
Giving some poetry here. I love that. Yeah, I want to say more to that, but we do got to let you go because we're running at the end of the show. But thank you so much for calling in, and hopefully we gave a perspective there. I realized, I don't know if we particularly answered, because I guess you were looking more about how we deal with death, and I don't think I adequately addressed that part of it. More just how to get over it in general, because the truth is there's not a lot to say about it, right? You just die. And that's just, you got to deal with that. I don't know. I had to put my cat down like a month ago, and that was the most horrible thing. When I was a Christian, I never even believed animals had souls or whatever, right? But it was just like I still recognize that as a living being that loved me and had memories, and you just have to deal with it. You just have to figure out how to move on and how to enjoy the time that you had with them, and know that that is meaningful.
And how much would you say, like, Dan, that your time in the faith community, that like was it comfort, or was it just kind of robbed people of the process of actually grieving? Because I think, like, this could get into a whole big topic, but like even just the North American way of viewing death and how we deal with like losing a loved one. I think that modern day kind of Christianity and religion kind of plays right into that it's just like, just kind of wrap it up. We'll see them later. I don't think that really does a whole lot for somebody for grieving. And like I said, like, grief is a huge topic. It's different than just trauma from what I've read about. It's a whole different bag of things to deal with, and it's ongoing. And so it's like, but there's nowhere in like the denomination or in the doctrine that I learned about that helped somebody process that, other than just shelf it,
Yeah, I know you just asked me, and I know I also said we need to wrap it up, so I'll be very quick in my response. Well,
it's the extended edition.
That's an interesting question. I never really thought about it, Erin. I don't know. Did it take away my ability to grieve? That's an interesting one. I didn't really know a lot of people that died when I was a Christian, so it's hard for me to say. I guess there is an interpretation about their not physical form, but their form as a person, as a continuance, right? There is no death, because they literally move on, and all the important parts about them, their personality, who they are, like, that moves on. So Christians are literally taught there is no death, right? Like that is the mantra. It's just the body. And of course, now as an atheist, I realize, well, yeah, there is a death in both sense, because I think personally, maybe other atheists disagree with this, I don't know, but I think I am tied to this body, and as soon as I leave that's it. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess it does. It's almost kind of like a Band-Aid. It's almost like a placeholder for grief. It's like, oh, well, they didn't really die, so we don't have to grieve over them like they died, even though
right.
They did.
Can I like bring up one other thing about that?
No, you can't.
Oh, all right, whatever. Go ahead. Keep talking forever. I was just gonna, to the same effect, talking to people over the years. A lot of people during their deconversion and loss of religion, they have to re-grieve family members that they've lost years ago, because of that. They realized that they had never dealt with the grief. They just had went to the funeral and praised God that they were saved and then call it a day. And so 10, 15, 20 years later, they've lost their faith, and now they have to sit with that grief for a little bit. And so it's a kind of like, I that's when I started seeing that of Christian, certain religions. I won't just target Christianity, but religions as somewhat of a like robbing people of their human right to grieve.
That's a good point. And like when my grandmother died, which happened fairly recently, it was last year, I remember the pastor saying the most important thing about her was that she was a Christian. And I was just like, that's not the most important thing to me. Like you, even just this Christian ritual of the funeral, right? And the words spoken about her, the Bible verses have nothing to fucking do with her life. Absolutely nothing to do with her life. That's not who she was, and that's not how I remember. But of course, you hire a priest or pastor to do that for you, and they have to do what they do. So like, even that's like, I don't know, not great. But hey, we really are out of time though. We gotta wrap things up.
This is what happens when you get two hosts on at the same time. We just keep talking.
Man, we got really deep and really sad places today. But you know what? I am glad for the folks that called in. I hope that we were able to do what we could do there with that. So thanks again to everybody that called into the show. And Erin, thank you so much for being on. Of course, where can people find you at, Erin?
You can find me here on the show. I am occasionally on here as a guest at TruthWanted. I also have a Twitter account if anybody wants to go see what I've done there, which is not a whole lot lately. And you can also email me here at I can't remember the new one.
Truth at atheist-community.org.
Atheist-community.org.
Yes, not a guest of the show. Erin is a host. Erin is a host along with myself.
That's right.
And other
so
folks.
You can. You can, if you email there, it'll come to both Dan and I. So that's how you can get a hold of me.
Yeah, and of course, I'm also on Twitter at ObjectivelyDan, so you can follow me on there too. So last but not least, I have to thank the wonderful, spectacular, amazing, stupendous crew that helped make this show happen every single week. Look at that crew, Cam. Those are the folks that make fun of me for all of my audio issues behind the scenes. And I learned to put up with them, because without them, this show would not be a thing. So you got to do what you got to do sometimes. Erin, do you have any words of wisdom for us before we close out the show?
I didn't think of anything ahead of time. So I just want to say that whatever you're going through, it's normal. You're normal. Human experience is messy and complicated, and you're okay. I don't know. That's all I have to say tonight.
That's it. Sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes it's that simple. I like those words of wisdom, Erin. But anyway, I'm Objectively Dan. This has been another episode of Truth Wanted. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat, Sundays at 3 p.m. Central, between the Atheist Experience and Talk Hidden. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.